So these are drawings for the facade of the Mayan Theater in downtown Los Angeles on Hill Street.
I remember it well. Does it still exist? I haven't
It
been
sure
around.
does, yeah. So the architect is Styles Clements of Morgan, Wells and Clements. This is one of the first collections we actually acquired. And this is a Mayan revival, obviously, facade and building actually throughout.
I mean, the rule of thumb is when you're working on a construction drawing it, that it would take a week per page. I look at these drawings and I think, this is 2 months at least for a page. And I find it very, very moving because the connection to the human being that drew it is so legible. It's so intense. And part of it, I think, is, you know, never having drawn anything like this, but having drafted, you understand the sort of concentration and looking. And so it's both a personal language and a very public language, and it all happens on the page. And when you're drawing this, you know, there's specific, and I don't even know how they did this, but there are specific tools where you are, you know, you're working your way down the page, and there's something called a parallel rule, which would help you draw straight lines. And then when you're using your pencil, you're rolling the pencil because you don't want it to become too thick, because, you know, it's flattened and it's like a kind of mechanical pencil. So, you know, there's a sound that goes with sharpening the pencil, because you would stick it in this thing and it would go shh. So that was one of the sounds that I'm hearing when I see this. And then the other thing is, because there was no air conditioning in the studio where I first worked, and it was very, very hot. And so you have to keep your arms off of the drawings, because the sweat from your forearms can totally lift up a drawing which is one of the first things I did, because I was working on a drawing, and I got down to the bottom, I looked up, and there was a lot of the drawing on the bottom of my arm, both of my arms. So, you know, the sort of technique where you're drawing it, you're thinking about it, and you're technically communicating it.
Okay, so this is Parkinson. This is the Bullock's Wilshire building on Wilshire, and it is, I think it was the second Bullock's store outside of downtown, and John Bullock, the owner, founder, kind of took a leap of faith and built this over in the suburbs.
I look at these and I think, number one, they're beautifully. Number two, just the technique of drawing them is amazing to me. It's not quite as moving because I don't see the hand, but it's also it's moving because I admire the precision. And then the other thing I think is very beautiful about these drawings is that they're very good at directing your attention to specific areas which need your attention. And so I think one of the things that's great about these drawings is they convey a huge amount of information without too much information. And they're saying, here's the building, this is the area, so we're looking at a tower, and then it says, but look at this particular part, because this part's going to be hard to build, and you need to think about it. And, you know, this is how the plan is, this is how the sort of roof plan is, but this is the part that you really need to think about. So it's a very, very legible way of giving information, because it's not all the same decibel level. I mean, I think about Bullock's Wilshire, and actually I never went in shopping, but for a short period of time I actually lived in South Pasadena.
Oh.
and I would drive.
My hometown.
Because I was learning how to drive, which was like on the Pasadena freeway is not the best. And I would pretty much try to take surface roads till I got to UCLA, where I went to architecture school, which is a long way to go. Mm-hmm. But when I saw Bullocks, it's like, okay, I'm not that far. I made it this far. I can keep on going. And I'm sure that that was never anybody's intention, but it became sort of useful and then had a meaning to me. And so that's why I think somehow meaning and use go together. Mm-hmm. And I think when people try to make iconic buildings, it's an image, but if it doesn't have the use, then images are so overwhelming at this point. It becomes an image and then it disappears as an image. Mm-hmm. So it always goes back to the personal.
Connections.
Yeah.
Right, I agree. It's kind of like saying I want to be famous.
Right.
It's like, make me famous.
Exactly. I think the kernel, the sort of soul of a building, the idea of a building, for us is hands, is drawing, is talking, is thinking. Sometimes it's not, it's even thinking about a thing. And the sort of idea or the object becomes a talisman around which we build a story. I tell my students, architecture can take blinders and narrow your focus into such a tiny pinhole, but the world is what feeds architecture. So you need in some way to connect to a larger world, and that can be through art, through literature, through dance, through travel, through food. Anything that cracks you open, because I think one of the most difficult things and sometimes painful things is to be cracked open. But it's also about being alive.